What if the only magic strong enough to kill a death god was the one everyone else laughed at? That's the question Setsuna asked himself, and then bet his entire future on the answer. To understand why, we need to go back to the moment it all collapsed. Setsuna was lying on cracked earth, body barely holding together, staring up at a sky that looked like it was ending. Because it was. Vidra the death god stood over him, sneering, telling him that everything they had fought for was already over. Every strategy, every sacrifice, every desperate last stand, all of it, meaningless. Setsuna refused to believe that. With the last scrap of strength left in his body, he threw a single punch at Vidra, and something impossible happened. It landed. Not enough to win, not enough to even slow him down much, but Vidra death god actually flinched from a basic close combat strike. Setsuna stared at his own fist, stunned, trying to make sense of what he had just felt. The death god's disintegration magic hadn't erased the punch. That meant something. He just didn't have enough time left to figure out what. Vidra was already winding up for the killing blow, mocking him, calling it the end of playtime. And then something around Setsuna's neck began to glow. A gift from his headmaster, a long time ago. The headmaster had called it the Emblem of Resurgence, said it housed the spirit of the tower itself. He had told Setsuna it would give him a chance to undo a single past regret if ever he had one. Setsuna had almost smiled when he heard that. He had told the headmaster he'd never regretted anything in his life, so he probably wouldn't need it. The headmaster had just smiled back that calm, knowing smile and said, as expected of the academy's top graduate, "But remember, there may come a time when he would need this." And standing on the edge of death, with the world literally crumbling around him, Setsuna finally understood. His only regret, the one choice he had walked away from years ago, the path of close combat magic. He had chosen ranged magic, instead become the strongest mage alive with it, and it still wasn't enough. That single punch had told him everything. The next time he swore, he would choose differently, and he would defeat Vidra. The pendant flared with blinding light and Setsuna was gone. He woke up at a desk inside a familiar classroom, with someone smacking him on the shoulder. It was Leo telling him it was his turn. Setsuna jolted upright, completely disoriented because Leo was supposed to be dead, or missing, or something. He had disappeared before Vidra arrived. Setsuna looked around the room and it all hit him at once. He was back at the Mage Academy, 10 years in the past, on the exact day of the ritual of choice. The day every student picks their magical path and locks it in for life. He had a second chance, and he already knew exactly what he was going to do with it. The other students were chattering quietly as Setsuna walked to the front of the class. A girl whispered to her friend that Setsuna was here, the one with aptitude for multiple paths of magic. That was the thing about Setsuna. He was a prodigy. Every department wanted him. A man in front of him opened a glowing book and laid out the options, the different paths of magic, each with its own spizzles, its own strengths. Once you chose a path, switching was nearly impossible. Like trying to believe two religions at once, the man said. He gestured confidently toward ranged magic, clearly expecting Setsuna to take it. Ranged magic was the obvious answer. Create elements, channel mana, fire at enemies from a safe distance. It's high damage, low risk. It was the path of legends. Setsuna had mastered it in his previous life, had become the best in the world with it, and it hadn't been enough. So he turned away from ranged magic and the room went silent. Leo standing nearby stared, the other students stared. Setsuna reached out and selected melee magic. The room erupted. The instructor, Silas, head of the ranged magic department, actually closed the book with a long, disappointed sigh. He had planned everything for Setsuna, had imagined the glory of mentoring the greatest mage alive. A boy nearby whispered that Setsuna had to be doing it for attention. Another guessed he was throwing his future away. The man who displayed ranged magic looked Setsuna dead in the eye and said he was destroying himself. He compared melee magic to defending against a swarm of arrows with a single rock. Setsuna didn't blink. He already knew what melee magic looked like from the outside. Outdated, weak, mocked. But that single punch, the one that had actually staggered Vidra, had come from melee magic. He couldn't let go of that hope. Silas stewed in visible frustration. The students whispered. The headmaster watched with quiet interest. And Setsuna stood there, perfectly calm, knowing something none of them did. The world had 10 years before destruction. Vidra would make his first appearance in 5. And the only magic that had ever touched a death god was the one everyone was currently mocking. After the ritual ended, students filed off toward their departments. Setsuna wasn't sure where to go. He had spent his entire previous life in the ranged magic wing. He looked for Leo, but Leo had already vanished into the crowd. He tried asking a nearby student for directions, but the kid was running late and brushed him off. And then, before he could even check the map at Central Garden, he heard the crack of a fireball. A fight close by. He rounded a corner and found a girl holding her ground against 3 boys, one of them clutching a brooch. Her brooch, one filled with mana her mother had spent years saving up to give her. The largest boy held it above his head like a trophy, sneering that it was a waste on a commoner. The girl was from the melee magic department, the boys were from ranged magic. Of course they were. The girl activated her physical boost, the core melee ability that enhanced her body, and held her ground. She summoned a mana blade and refused to back down. The boy mocked her reach, said her blade was too short, launched another fireball. She was losing ground fast when Setsuna stepped in, lifted her out of the fireball's path, and calmly asked if she could show him to the melee classroom. One of the boys recognized him immediately, and the leader grinned, saying this was even better. Now he could crush the famous Setsuna too. Setsuna told them, very quietly, that the outcome of a battle doesn't depend only on what magic you use. Then he proved it. He channeled his mana into his legs, with a precision that came from a decade of combat experience no one in that courtyard could see. He shot forward so fast the boys couldn't track him, dodging every fireball with room to spare. He noticed the leader only used fire, probably the only element he could control. When the boy poured everything into a massive double-handed fireball, Setsuna summoned a mana sword and cut clean through it. The girl's eyes went wide. She asked if you could actually do that, cut through a spell. Setsuna told her a mage battle comes down to mana control, and his control was exceptional. He closed this distance in an instant and delivered a mana-charged fist that sent the leader stumbling back. The other two didn't need convincing. The brooch was returned without another word. The girl squeezed Setsuna's hand in gratitude, swinging it enthusiastically, and introduced herself as Ila Roselle. She already knew who he was, famous prodigy, multiple aptitudes, and she asked immediately why he had picked melee magic. Setsuna thought about it. She wouldn't believe the truth. He just asked her to show him where their classroom was. Together, they ran toward the most remote corner of the academy, and Setsuna noticed for the first time and not the last just how unfair that felt. He had chosen the most despised path in the school. He had no experience in it, and he had 5 years. He was already calculating. Their instructor, a man named Zachary, was waiting at the classroom door, and he was not happy. He sneered the moment he saw Setsuna, telling him the days of coasting on good grades were finished. He leaned in close and reminded Setsuna exactly what the melee magic division was, the academy's outcasts. Setsuna, annoyed, brushed Zachary's hand aside and told him flatly that it was irritating to hear a melee magic instructor tear down melee magic. Zachary grabbed him by the collar. Setsuna didn't move. He said that melee magic held tremendous potential, and that was precisely why he had chosen it. Zachary backed off, but not without issuing a challenge. If Setsuna believed in melee magic so much, he could prove it. He gestured to the training grounds, where students were beating their fists against enormous stones, trying to extract crystals hidden inside. None of them had even left a scratch. Zachary pointed Setsuna toward the biggest rock on the field, much larger than the rest, and gave him 10 minutes. Ila immediately protested. 10 minutes wasn't even close to enough. Zachary just showed the timer. A full minute had already passed while they were arguing. Setsuna stepped forward and placed his hand on the surface of the rock. Zachary scoffed. Even he thought to himself, would need 30 minutes just to make a dent. Setsuna told Zachary he would finish it in 10 seconds. The class went very quiet. Setsuna summoned a melee weapon and didn't swing for power. He swung for precision. He had felt the flow of mana through the stone, had located its weakest internal point. One precise strike later, nothing seemed to happen. Zachary opened his mouth to say he knew it. Then the rock split apart. Setsuna held out the purple crystal inside, and told Zachary he was right about the 10 seconds. The class exploded. Students asking each other if this kid was stronger than their own instructor. Zachary sputtered that it had to be a trick, that 10 minutes wouldn't be enough for that rock. Setsuna told him coolly that if it took Zachary 10 minutes, maybe he should sit in with the students. And then another instructor appeared, Lionel, grabbing Zachary by the collar. Lionel, still yawning like he had just woken up, told Zachary to stop bullying students. He explained to the class what Setsuna had done. He had sensed the mana flow inside the rock and struck the weakest point. Then Lionel looked at Zachary, and very calmly told him to demonstrate the mana guard for the class. Before Zachary could even get into position, Lionel shoved him clean through the wall of the building. A beat of silence. Lionel then clapped Setsuna on the back, and told him that for melee magic, that performance was more than enough. Setsuna told him, without missing a beat, that he wasn't planning on losing to any other department, and intended to reach the top. Lionel laughed. He said that was exactly the spirit and offered to personally teach Setsuna any spell he was interested in. Then he announced to the whole class that, since it was early, they would be selecting their department representative for the upcoming intramural contest. The intramural contest, 8 magical departments, 1 representative each. Tournament format. Winner takes glory. Setsuna already knew exactly what winning it meant. He'd done it before in his past life for ranged magic. Winning was how he had caught the headmaster's tension back then. He needed to do it again. But before that plan could even take shape, a heavy presence stepped into the room. Drago, a mountain of a person who had been training melee magics since birth, 17 years of physical conditioning in a single body. He punched the air, and the pressure wave forced everyone to take a step back. He told Setsuna directly, if he wanted to be the representative, he would have to prove it in a duel. Setsuna agreed. Lionel stepped in and scheduled the duel for exactly 1 week out. Drago left with a warning not to back down. Ila, watching him go, asked Setsuna if he was sure he could win. Setsuna shook his head, honestly not yet, but he left with an idea already forming. He led Ila into the forest, stopping at a tree so massive it felt ancient. He touched the bark, and the tree responded, green light washing over him, like it recognized him. The world tree, rooted for millennia. He explained it to Ila. The tree's blessing accelerated recovery for those it accepted. He had found this place before traveling back. With it, he could push his body past its limits during training, then recover and go again. He told her he planned to repeat the process 1,000 times before the duel. Ila stared at him like he had lost his mind. Setsuna told her the math was simple, he couldn't catch Drago through normal training. Drago had 17 years on him, so he would train differently. Ila, moved by something she couldn't quite name, decided to help. She would spy on Drago's training habits. What she found did not inspire confidence. Drago was doing push-ups with 5 fortified rocks on his back. She reported back to Setsuna, who was sitting calmly under a tree reading a martial arts manual. She told him this was absolutely not the moment for reading. Setsuna closed the book and said he had already memorized everything in it. Then he demonstrated a swift kick that sliced a falling leaf clean in half, a mana sword that shredded 3 more without breaking form. But it still wasn't enough, and the moment he pushed harder, a wound opened on his hand and he dropped to one knee. Ila gasped. Setsuna looked at the wound and smiled faintly. He told her he was doing it on purpose. Physical boost pushed past the breaking point, followed by world tree recovery. It forced his body to rebuild stronger each cycle. The wound closed before her eyes. Ila asked if he really needed to go that far. He said he didn't have any other option. But what struck her more than the training itself was what he said next. He told her he could endure it because he knew he was getting better, and as long as that was true, it was bearable. She thought about that for a long time. People said he was born talented, but watching him lift impossible weight with bleeding hands and refuse to stop, she started to understand the truth. A week later, the duel arrived. The crowd gathered. Drago stood on one side, Setsuna on the other. Drago commented that at least Setsuna hadn't run. Setsuna told him he genuinely wanted to be the representative. He meant it. Ila called the start. Setsuna moved first, a left hook that Drago blocked with a mana guard so solid it barely registered, but Drago was still pushed back. Drago retaliated with a punch so fast the crowd couldn't see it coming, only felt the pressure wave. They were stunned when the dust cleared, and Setsuna was completely unharmed, having stepped out of the way at the last possible moment. Students watching whispered to each other, had these two really just started at the academy a week ago? Drago threw punch after punch. Setsuna blocked, weaved, countered with precise defensive strike. Drago got louder, accused Setsuna of only, called his body weak, called melee magic a joke. Ila worried the week of training hadn't been enough. Then Drago drew a mana sword and charged. Setsuna drew his own. Their blades crashed together with a force that cracked the ground beneath them. Drago slashed fast and furious. Setsuna vaulted over each one, landed his own slash in the gap, and forced Drago back. Setsuna told Drago he understood where his anger came from, but that he was fighting for something bigger. Drago didn't understand what that meant. Setsuna broke through his mana sword with a strike so precise it shattered the technique entirely. Drago took a hit and immediately swung back harder. His rage was fuel. Setsuna felt it. Ila felt it from the sideline. Even Lionel, watching silently, could not tell who would come out on top. Then Setsuna disappeared. He was in the air high above the arena after leaving a mana crafted after image to fool Drago's eyes. He explained it from above. Concentrate mana at a point. Split the image. Then move while the opponent watches the ghost. And with that, he came down hard, a single decisive slash that laid Drago flat. The crowd was in complete shock. Lionel announced the match over, Setsuna winner. And then Drago got up. Slowly, painfully, but up. The audience gasped again. That was the blow that had ended the fight, and Drago was standing through it. Drago was furious because he could tell Setsuna had pulled the final strike. Setsuna offered him his hand anyway. Drago demanded to know what Setsuna was fighting for. Setsuna told him simply, to never lose to anyone or anything, to keep getting stronger. Drago looked at him for a long moment, then accepted the hand. He said he understood now why Setsuna was that strong. Setsuna told him he had been a worthy opponent, and that he believed Drago would be a great help in the fight ahead. Lionel raised Setsuna's hand to the crowd, and declared him the melee department's representative for the intramural contest. Days later, Setsuna stepped into a room with the representatives from all 8 departments. A boy with glasses immediately planted his foot on top of Setsuna's. and pressed down a strange greeting from Noel, the enhancement magic department's rep. Noel told him that in 100 years no melee mage had ever won the contest. He suggested Setsuna sit in the corner and lift weights. Setsuna moved his own foot on top of Noel's, matched the pressure evenly, and said he didn't care about the last 100 years. He would be the champion this year. Noel told him to dream on, and then the headmaster walked in. Everyone stood. Setsuna noticed this. The headmaster had appeared at this exact moment in his past life too. A pink-haired girl named Carol from the Summon Magic department greeted him warmly and promised to make him proud. The headmaster acknowledged everyone, announced the matchups drawn at random, tournament format, and reminded them the matches were in 10 days. As the headmaster turned to leave, Setsuna called out to him. He introduced himself melee magic representative and asked a favor. If he won the contest, could he learn about the headmaster's second magical specialization? The headmaster's expression shifted. He went very still. He asked in a low voice, where Setsuna had heard about that. Setsuna didn't blink. He said the deal was simple. Melee magic wins the contest for the first time in a century, and the headmaster teaches him the secret. The headmaster studied him for a long moment, then agreed. On one condition, that Setsuna actually win. He warned him it would not be easy. Setsuna bowed and said he intended to win regardless. That evening, Setsuna sat outside alone, eating something Isla had recommended, thinking about how different this life already felt from the last. He barely had time to enjoy it. A massive fist came crashing toward his head from a blind spot. He blocked it instinctively and found himself facing a stone golem. Noel, watching from cover, had sent it. Noel stepped out and told Setsuna there was no need to wait for the official match. He summoned several more golems from multiple directions and told Setsuna he would pay for the humiliation from earlier. Setsuna remained calm. Bells rang somewhere in the distance, and Noel stopped, deciding it wouldn't look good to be caught cornering a defenseless opponent. He dismissed the golems and left, threatening to crush Setsuna far more thoroughly in the actual match. Setsuna watched him go, analyzing what he had seen. Multiple golems controlled simultaneously, intelligent and coordinated. And then he noticed the bread he'd been eating had gotten knocked to the ground. That bothered him almost as much. The next day, Lionel gathered the class and ran an analysis of the Drago vs Setsuna duel. He asked both of them to identify their own weaknesses. Drago said his mana control and emotional control had both been unstable. Setsuna said he lacked raw physical strength. Drago had overpowered him and he knew it. Lionel told them growth was impossible without facing weaknesses directly. Then he laid out the training plan for the days before the contest. Drago would work on speed, attacking Setsuna from multiple angles to simulate fighting golems. Setsuna would focus on blocking and counterattacking. They trained hard, they took hits, they improved. By the time they both lay flat on the ground, exhausted but grinning, Lionel told them they would be ready. On the day of the contest, the arena filled with noise and excitement. The host announced the 781st intramural contest, 8 departments, 1 tan champion. Setsuna faced Noel first. Most of the crowd had already bet on Noel. One boy who Setsuna had defeated weeks earlier pushed through the crowd to tell him to win and show everyone who was really in charge. The stage for the first match was a desert, and Noel immediately laughed, saying luck wasn't on Setsuna's side. Noel reached into a pouch and pulled out fortified rock fragments. He explained that in sand these fragments could form golems impervious to blades. He scattered the entire pouch across the arena and dozens of golems rose from the sand. The cusp stunned. Isla was worried. Noel was gloating. Setsuna told him it was disappointing, he had expected more. Noel, thrown off for a second, sent every golem charging at once. A cloud of dust rose and swallowed the stage. The crowd couldn't see anything. Noel smiled and waited. Inside the dust, Setsuna was working methodically, cutting golems apart one after another. He had mastered how to demolish them long ago, in a very different life. The crowd couldn't see it, but Noel could, and his smile disappeared. Setsuna moved toward him steadily, explaining that in close range, no other school of magic could beat melee, and golems with their predictable movements were nothing to him. He reached Noel and punched him. Noel went airborne. The dust cleared. Setsuna stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard but standing. Crowd was silent for a full second. Then someone said, "Did the melee mage actually win? 100 years and it was already over in the first match." Silas, watching from the stands, looked unhappy but admitted the truth quietly. Noel hadn't lost because of mistakes. Setsuna was simply more skilled. The second match, Carol from Summon Magic versus the Formation Magic representative, was fierce. Setsuna watched every second of it, cataloging Carol's abilities. She dominated from start to finish. Her summon beast Fenrir was overwhelming. He knew their final match would be a real fight. After the second round, Leo showed up to congratulate him. Setsuna was careful. He remembered Leo from his past life, second best in the ranged magic department, right behind Setsuna himself. He asked why Leo wasn't the ranged magic representative. Leo's expression darkened. He admitted that Oktar, the actual representative, had tricked him into giving up the spot. He warned Setsuna. Oktar would stop at nothing. Don't let your guard down. Setsuna nodded and that away. The second round arrived and Setsuna's match against Oktar was next. But before the fight even started, Setsuna discovered a magical artifact placed in his waiting room, one that would drain all his mana the moment he touched it. He had already noticed it. He had already moved it. That was the 7th attempt on his life since the contest began. Then a knock at the door, 3 small children with a bouquet, sent by someone they couldn't identify. Setsuna noticed the marks on one child's neck. He recognized those markings from the war. He kicked the bouquet away, before anyone could touch it. The flowers were from a poisonous plant called venium. The children were already showing symptoms. If not treated immediately, they wouldn't survive. Ela stepped forward, and pressed the brooch her mother had given her against the children, channeling the healing spells stored inside. The marks faded. The children were going to be okay. Setsuna took the bouquet, its poison was worst when in bloom, and launched it toward the world tree, where it burned without spreading. Meanwhile, the host in the arena was counting down. Setsuna had missed the start of his match. He was about to be disqualified, and then he walked in. The crowd went quiet. Oktar smiled that unsettled smile. Setsuna told him plainly, using children as poison delivery was something he wouldn't forgive. Oktar feigned ignorance. Said the children should feel honored to have played a part in his victory. That was all Setsuna needed to hear. But the match was still a nightmare. The residual poison in his blood from the venium was slowing him down, even after the world tree had mostly purified it. Oktar hit him with star pulse magic, and though Setsuna dodged most of it, his mana guard failed at the worst moment and he took serious damage. He struggled to stand. Oktar mocked him. The audience started whispering that running away was the only thing melee mages could do, but then Ela appeared at the arena entrance. She called out to Setsuna, telling him the children were safe. And that was it. That was all he needed. He smiled and told Oktar now he could fight with everything he had. Oktar realized Setsuna's mana was suddenly surging impossibly high and backed up. Setsuna had been using physical boost the entire fight to activate his cells and purge the remaining poison from his blood. He had 1 strike worth of real power left. He deflected Oktar's next attack with his sword, redirecting it back at Oktar. Oktar nullified it easily, mocked him again. Said the only grave being dug today was Setsuna's. Then he looked up, and found Setsuna was already standing directly in front of him. Setsuna told him it was Oktar who had underestimated. Oktar begged. Setsuna hit him with everything that remained. The host called Setsuna as the winner. But in the chaos of the stage shifting beneath them, the floor began to give way. Both Setsuna and the unconscious Oktar were falling, and then Carol appeared. She summoned Fenrir and swooped in to pull them both from the edge. She asked Setsuna if he minded her stepping in. He thanked her, and watched her carefully, thinking that she was absolutely going to be the hardest opponent he'd face. The crowd was still in shock. Silas behind the scenes was furious. He called Oktar a useless fool and swore Setsuna would regret everything. Setsuna reunited with Ela and Lionel, and asked immediately about the children. Ela told him they were resting comfortably in the infirmary. He exhaled, but then he felt a sudden sharp spike of something dark from somewhere in the crowd. Bloodlust intense, contained and then gone. He couldn't identify the source, but he didn't forget it. That evening, standing alone in the forest, Setsuna thought about what was waiting ahead. 1 week until the final match, one strange magical presence still unidentified. And then Lionel appeared, because Setsuna had asked to meet him. He told Lionel there was a technique he wanted to learn, the Comet Fist. Lionel went very still. That was the name people used to call him. He asked where Setsuna had heard it. Setsuna told him he had heard the legend before a melee mage, who had taken down a fearsome dragon with a single blow. Standing here now, he was certain Lionel was that mage. Lionel was quiet for a moment, then he agreed to teach him. He gathered mana in his fist and told Setsuna to watch carefully. He had only ever used this technique twice in his life. He drove his fist into the ground, and the shockwave destroyed everything around them in a wide radius. Setsuna stood in the debris and said it was beyond anything he had imagined. Lionel explains the Comet Fist required focusing massive mana into a single point, difficult in one-on-one combat, nearly impossible to aim twice. Setsuna told him he was looking forward to learning it. Meanwhile, in Carol's room, an unknown man sat across from her enjoying tea. He congratulated her on advancing to the final, asked if she felt confident facing the melee department's representative. She smiled warmly, said no one knew what would happen, and went to fetch him another cup. The moment she turned her back, the man pulled out a card and pressed a symbol into the back of her neck. She collapsed. The man smiled to himself, noting it would be ideal if Carol could defeat Setsuna, but if not, he would handle them both. Setsuna trained through the week. And on the final day, Lionel watched him complete the Comet Fist technique and declared with genuine shock that it had taken him just a week to master what should have required years. The day of the final arrived. The arena was full. The host announced the 781st Contest's championship match. Carol, fresh from back-to-back victories, versus Setsuna, the melee mage who had shaken everything up. 3 small children in the stands were cheering for Setsuna. The stage was the goddess's ruins, surrounded by a formation mage's barrier strong enough to contain the battle. Carol told Setsuna she could tell he had prepared well. She planned to bring out everything she had. The host announced the start. Carol summoned Fenrir immediately and mounted it, riding into battle. Fenrir launched glacial bombs infused with snow flurries. Setsuna read the attack pattern and dodged each one, almost surprised by how familiar it felt from watching her earlier rounds. Carol warned him he couldn't keep that up forever. Then she had Fenrir freeze the entire stage. Ice spread across every surface, the temperature dropped, the mana chill built. Setsuna looked around. Normal attacks weren't going to work here. The longer this dragged out, the worse his position became. He started using the ruins around him, jumping between broken stone, using rubble to gain height and dodge. He was concentrating mana in his fist, building toward one massive strike. He needed time. Every jump, every dodge was buying seconds. The crowd thought he was only defending, that he was losing. Carol sensed something was wrong and summoned a second familiar Garuda, a giant bird alongside Fenrir. The crowd erupted. 2 familiars, once an extraordinary display of talent. Both attacked Setsuna simultaneously from different angles. He deflected one with each hand, pushed them both back, and told Carol calmly that he had been expecting her to play her trump card. And then the man in the stands snapped his fingers. Carol screamed. A dark aura consumed her, and suddenly the arena was full of shadow monsters, erupting from Carol's body as she lost control. Lionel stood up in the stands, shouting for the match to stop, for the barrier to come down, but the formation mage who had cast it was already captured. The shadow monsters threw themselves at Setsuna. He fought through them, reading their movements, keeping Carol in sight. A one-horned beast drove its horn into his leg. He refused to stop moving. Fenrir clamped down on his arm. The pain was overwhelming. And in that moment, something Lionel had said in training cut through the pain like a blade. The key to melee magic wasn't just power. It was staying focused enough to land the final blow even while taking damage. Setsuna let the damage land and used it. The man controlling Carol thought his arm had been destroyed. He was wrong. Setsuna had been redirecting his mana through the impact, concentrating power while the familiar held on. He looked up. The familiars were in a frenzy, treating him as prey, and announced he would finish it in a single punch. He unleashed a charged bullet, everything he had stored in one detonating blast. Every familiar went down at once. Carol collapsed. Setsuna rushed to catch her before she hit the stage. The host announced it. Setsuna winner. For the first time in 100 years, the melee magic department had claimed the intramural championship. The arena erupted. The 3 children who had been poisoned were on their feet, screaming his name. Lionel found the formation alive, recovering, and the barrier came down. The headmaster descended to the arena floor, examined Carol, and told the crowd to leave the rest to him. He turned to Setsuna and said simply that he had proven his strength. He would keep his word. Setsuna thanked him, and was told to come to the headmaster's office the next day. But that night, in the infirmary while Setsuna was still recovering, a shadow moved through the halls. It found the barrier on Carol's room and shattered it. It stepped inside, preparing to silence her permanently. A blade sliced through the attack before it could land. Setsuna had been waiting. He stood in front of Carol's bed, eyes hard, and told the intruder he had hoped it wasn't who he suspected. It was Leo. Leo told him it was impressive that he had finally figured it out, but no evidence had pointed to Leo directly. Setsuna said he'd had a hunch confirmed the moment Leo walked through the door. He had sensed it during the final match, the same signature of power, the death god's power, moving through Leo. They stepped outside to settle it. Leo revealed what he had been granted, the magic of disintegration, a gift from the death god himself. Whatever magic Suna threw, Leo would erase it. Setsuna tried anyway. His mana sword was cut in half. He tried again. Same result. He threw a fireball. Leo watched it dissolve, then told Setsuna he would have been much stronger in the ranged magic department, and asked, in a tone that felt almost wistful, what he could do about the choices other people made. He attacked with electric spikes that drove into Setsuna's already wounded leg. Setsuna asked him why. Why was he doing this? Leo said there was no reason. He was simply tired of the world. Destroying things felt like knocking over a sandcastle someone else had built. Setsuna stared at him and asked if this was really Leo, the same person he had trained alongside, called a friend. He was thinking of one last option when the sky above them lit up. Lightning struck, targeted, precise. The headmaster stood on the roof with his summon, a white dragon. He told Setsuna he had been detecting impure mana for some time. He had arrived just in time. Leo shrugged. said the headmaster, was the head of the school for a reason. The dragon attacked with its full ability, the blaze skill, and Leo walked through it untouched. He said had it not been for the power the death god had given him, it would have been a real problem. The headmaster understood. Magic disintegration. The records of the Silverlock family had mentioned it, an ancient dark power tied to the catastrophe that would one day threaten the world. Leo taunted them, said no magic could touch him. The headmaster combined 3 magical attributes into a single strike. Leo lifted into the air and answered with a spread of energy so wide that everyone in range was at risk. The headmaster, reading the attack, told Setsuna to take exactly 2 steps to the right. Sunafu, the blast missed him by inches. The headmaster was dodging too, using a kind of movement Leo couldn't identify. Leo prepared to go bigger, threatened to wipe them all out. The headmaster called out to Setsuna. Setsuna understood without words. The headmaster summoned a holy butterfly and flew skyward on the dragon, drawing Leo's attention and fire. Leo launched everything at the dragon, a massive explosion. From the smoke Setsuna came. Leo saw him and laughed, said it was too bad. Setsuna had been hiding behind the dragon, charging up an attack. He conjured a barrier around himself and told Setsuna all his effort was pointless. Setsuna told Leo that choosing melee magic had not been a mistake. He would prove it with 1 strike. He hit the barrier at a speed that bypassed the rate at which disintegration could counter it. The barrier shattered, the punch landed, Leo crashed down. Setsuna understood it then. Melee magic moved faster than disintegration could react. That was the answer. He turned to the headmaster and said he thought they were through it. And then Leo stood up, badly hurt, still standing. He hit Setsuna with everything left in him. The impact destroyed Setsuna's sword and launched him into a wall. Setsuna crumpled and fell. As his consciousness faded, he heard Leo saying he couldn't believe Setsuna had lasted that long. What a powerful opponent. And then, somewhere between unconscious and gone, Leo's voice followed him into the dark, with words from a different time. Words from the war, about the people Setsuna hadn't saved, about failing to be a hero. Setsuna woke up 3 days later in the infirmary. Ila was at his side, visibly relieved. He took in the room and immediately asked about the headmaster. Ila said the headmaster was in his office. There had been a meeting for all department heads. Setsuna got out of bed. Ila told him he wasn't fully healed yet. He put his hand on her shoulder, apologized for worrying her, and told her he had to go now. He found the headmaster after the meeting, and the 2 of them stood face to face. Setsuna apologized, everything had happened because of him. The headmaster told him not to be too hard on himself, then explained what had happened after Setsuna lost consciousness. Leo had told them that as much as he would love to finish it, he had spent too much mana. He had created a passage and left, promising they would meet again. The headmaster said he had chosen not to follow Leo through the passage. What lay beyond it was far too dangerous to confront unprepared. Setsuna sat down and brought up the boundary he had seen, the dimensional presence, the mysterious entity that neither of them fully understood yet. The headmaster asked Setsuna a direct question then, how much did he actually know? He told Setsuna that since he had asked about the sex specialization, a secret almost no one was aware of, he wanted to trust him fully. And for that he needed the truth. Setsuna hesitated. Could he convince anyone that he was from the future? Then he held up the pendant, the Emblem of Resurgence. The headmaster's eyes widened. He recognized it. The blessing of the spirit of time, which had been thought lost. If it had already been used in a different era, he said quietly. Then time travel was not only possible, it had already happened. Setsuna told him everything. The death god would destroy the world. He and his followers would assassinate the headmaster. The war would be lost. And Setsuna had come back with nothing but regret and 10 years to change it. The headmaster placed his hand on Setsuna's shoulder. He said Setsuna had been carrying this alone. That would change. And as promised, he would teach Setsuna the 2nd type of magic, to be used against the death god. It wasn't part of the original branches of magic, he explained. It was elemental magic. A form of magic where the caster becomes one with elemental spirits, cultivating their power from within. Because of its unique nature, elemental magic could be combined with other forms, including melee, making it extraordinarily versatile. He brought Setsuna to the world tree to begin. He explained that the first step was to sense the presence of spirits, which existed everywhere in nature. Setsuna closed his eyes, focused, tried to become one with what was around him. Nothing. He tried again and felt nothing each time. The headmaster saw his frustration and explained, to connect with spirits, a person needed to reach a trance-like state, a complete emptying of the mind. Setsuna was the wrong personality type for it. His mind never stopped moving. The headmaster told him it had taken 3 full years to reach that state himself. Setsuna told him they didn't have 3 years. They had 5 at most before Vidra made his first appearance. And the apostles could arrive at any time before that. That surprised the headmaster. The word apostles, Sets explained, 12 beings from another world, each with powers beyond ordinary magic. Leo was one of them. The headmaster confirmed that the Silverlock family records had mentioned exactly 12 apostles tied to the coming catastrophe. He understood Setsuna's urgency now, but he also warned him that anxiety and impatience could invite disaster, that rushing recklessly was its own kind of danger. His solution: joint dungeon training. He told Setsuna that Lionel would explain the details, but that the training would push him past his limits and offer insights into elemental magic naturally, through experience rather than forced concentration. Meanwhile, in a darkened castle elsewhere, Leo was answering for himself. Apostle number 10 Zagan told Leo he had some nerve showing up this late. Apostle number 9 Puka mocked him for getting into trouble with a single student. Leo, listed as the 12th apostle, shrugged and said he had gotten a little carried away catching up with an old friend. Before it could escalate, the second apostle Satanaxis stepped in. He pressed his authority down on both of them and reminded them that nothing should hinder the god's ambitions. Zagan pointed at Leo and asked if Satanaxis planned to deal with the boy who had failed to finish the job himself. Puka offered to handle it himself, with a smile that suggested it would be spectacular. Satanaxis told them it wouldn't be necessary. Someone had already been assigned to handle Setsuna. Back at the academy, classes resumed. Isla found Setsuna at his desk and asked worriedly if he was sure he should be in class just days after being hospitalized again. He said all he had to do was sit and listen, it wasn't too taxing. The headmaster had decided not to announce the threat of the death god and his apostles publicly yet. A few trusted instructors had been told and asked to guard the academy and locate Leo. Elemental magic training was on hold for now. Setsuna told Ulla he was fine, apologized for worrying her and clenched his fists under the desk. He needed to recover, and then he needed to get back to work. Lionel announced to the class the next piece of news: interdepartmental joint training in a dungeon. Teams of students from multiple departments, entering a replica 1-star underground ruin together. Real monsters, real traps, real treasure chests with points that could earn them a spot in the Royal Mage Army's field training. 100 points got you into that field training. Setsuna had already decided on 200. Drago, standing next to him, said the same number at the same moment. They exchanged a look. Drago said today they could finally try it. On the day of the training, Setsuna and Drago were paired with two seniors, Mahun, from Formation Magic, and Yuzua, who covered her face with a hood. Mahun patted them on the shoulder cheerfully, said they were in good hands, and immediately dropped the smiles the moment they stepped away from the others. He told them he wouldn't be going easy on his juniors from that point forward. Inside the dungeon, Setsuna noticed something immediately: a false wall, where the plant growth pattern was different from the surrounding area. He told the group there was a hidden space behind it, and he could hear wind coming through. Before he could elaborate, Drago punched the wall open. They went in. Traps started firing almost immediately, a boulder down the stairs, arrows from automated mechanisms. Setsuna handled each one with precise strikes before they could endanger the group. Drago spotted a chest. Before either of them could touch it, Mahun's magic snatched the contents and the 15 points that came with them. Drago's jaw tightened. It happened again and again. Every time Drago or Setsuna found something or took down a target, Mahun appeared at the last second to claim the points. After a while, Mahun had 55, Yuzua had 30, Setsuna had 25, and Drago had 10. During a rest, Mahun told Drago with a grin that people with skills were there to be used, and if they didn't like it, they could try stopping him. Setsuna kept his thoughts to himself but watched Yuzua carefully. She was attacking monsters steadily, showing no concern about points, no reaction to the chaos around her. Something was off. They entered a dark throne room. Something was seated at the center. Mahun's magic grabbed for it and a dark aura exploded outward. Setsuna yanked Mahun out of the blast path with one hand. A monster rose from the chest, not a 1-star threat, not remotely. The No-Life King, Monarch of Death, looked at them with intelligent eyes and declared that whoever had interrupted its sleep would pay with their lives. Setsuna immediately told Drago to stand back and let him handle it. Drago's first thought was how many points defeating it would be worth. The creature summoned magic circles simultaneously from a distance. Drago charged and was stopped cold by a barrier that appeared out of nowhere. His mana guard saved him from the worst of it, but barely. When Setsuna noticed two more circles forming around Yuzua and Yuzua just standing still, not moving, not reacting, something clicked. He grabbed her and pulled her clear. She thanked him, but her eyes were wrong. Draw and Setsuna made eye contact. Without words, they agreed on a plan. They had been wearing magically weighted training bands, since Lionel gave them bands designed to be worn until removed, at which point the body's strength increased dramatically. They threw them off. Mahun stared. They had been wearing those things this entire time? The No-Life King prepared another barrage. It was already too late. Setsuna and Drago hit it simultaneously with a combined strike that ended the fight in one exchange. 50 points each. The dungeon shook with the impact, and then Yuzua was gone. An earthquake followed violent, structural. Monsters flooded in from every direction, not normal dungeon monsters, undead, resurrected by dark power. No points from killing them, they kept coming back. Setsuna felt something rising from below, dark magic, deliberate. He told the group, source of the mana was beneath them, and Yuzua might be connected to it. They fought through the undead and descended, eventually finding Yuzua trapped inside a dark magic circle, half absorbed. Setsuna told Drago not to touch the trap directly. He identified it a dark artifact, same type he had seen on the black market in his previous life. He dismantled it with precision and pulled Yuzua free. She collapsed into his arms. He noticed the earring. The source was the earring. Setsuna took her on his back and told the group they had to move. Transportation bracelets stopped working. The dungeon had upgraded itself around them. A rockslide sealed the path out. Setsuna told Drago to stay with Mahun and Yuzua while he went deeper alone. He needed to find the dungeon's core and disable whatever was causing all of this. He descended into the lowest level and found the source. A two-headed hydra, partially decomposed, forcibly resurrected. He knew immediately only Vidra's power could do that. He fought the hydra alone with dual mana blades, a technique he had only recently begun mastering. It cost him significantly. Acid ate through his clothes. One wrong move would have meant death. But he severed both heads simultaneously, the only way to stop the regeneration, and the hydra fell. And then Instructor Giovanni appeared, clapping. He congratulated Setsuna on defeating his creation, said it confirmed what he had suspected since the intramural contest. And then Giovanni told him what he had been waiting for. He wanted Setsuna's corpse. He planned to turn Setsuna into an undead puppet just as he had done to Yuzua. Setsuna went cold. Giovanni explained that he himself was undead. Vidra had found him near death and given him immortality. Counts off as a gift he wanted to share. Setsuna told him to stop, then attack. Giovanni used ice teleportation, turning himself into ice, vanishing, reappearing elsewhere. Setsuna was already running low on mana from the Hydra fight. He needed to end this quickly. He read the magic circle that marked each teleportation point and waited. Then Drago appeared, throwing a stone that interrupted Giovanni's rhythm. Setsuna used the opening hit Giovanni hard, again and again, until Giovanni slammed into the wall and collapsed. Setsuna fainted from mana exhaustion a moment later, but it wasn't over. Giovanni pulled an item from his own body, something Vidra had given him, and began to merge it with himself. He transformed a monster wearing an instructor's face. Drago stood between the monster and the unconscious Setsuna, bracing. And then in the haze between waking and sleeping, Setsuna saw a flare in the dark. He thought of the headmaster's teachings about spirits existing everywhere in nature. He reached toward it not with his hands, but with something deeper. The spirit responded, told him to stop causing such a fuss. Setsuna found himself standing in a vast, impossible space, stones floating, air thick with heat, face to face with a massive spirit made of flame. He told the spirit about Vidra, about his friends in danger, about what was at stake. The spirit was unimpressed. Set the ground on fire under Setsuna's feet. Setsuna stood in the flames and did not move. He refused to pass out, refused to back down. He told the spirit he didn't care. He would never back down. Not when Drago was still fighting. Not when the people he cared about were still in danger. The spirit paused. It had never seen a human withstand those flames before. It told Setsuna to get out of its sight and go teach the villains a lesson. Power flooded into him, and Setsuna returned to the dungeon, wreathed in flame, and defeated the transformed Giovanni in a single, devastating strike. Isla arrived moments later, out of breath, having felt something wrong and come back for them. The three of them, Setsuna, Drago and Isla, were found by the rescue team not long after and carried out. Setsuna woke in the infirmary again, 3 days later, to find Lionel sitting beside him. Lionel told him Drago and Isla were fine. Yuzua would recover. The senior from Formation Magic was stable. And then Zachary knocked on the door and walked in, holding a plate of peeled apples. He sat down and apologized for how he had treated Setsuna on the first day. He explained that when he had realized melee magic was his only path, his family and friends had abandoned him. Seeing Setsuna, someone with aptitude for everything, choose melee magic anyway, had made him furious in a way he couldn't explain. But Setsuna's team had scored the highest in the joint training. Setsuna had set a record for the department, and that changed something in Zachary. He extended his hand, said thank you. Setsuna extended his back and said he also had to apologize and to thank Zachary for treating his wounds. Later, Lionel handed Setsuna a glove from the headmaster designed to cover the new mark on his hand. He told him what it was, a spirit magic crest. It had started a great war 100 years ago. The Holy Church had banned it entirely. Lionel told him not to use it in front of anyone, because if the church found out, the consequences would be catastrophic. Setsuna asked how Lionel knew about any of this. Lionel said the headmaster had told him everything: the death god, the apostles, spirit magic, and the truth about Setsuna coming back from the future. Only Lionel and the headmaster knew. Lionel told Setsuna he didn't care what his past life had looked like. What mattered was that Setsuna was a student of the melee magic department right now. That was enough. And then the spirit, the flame entity that had given him its power, appeared, not in the form of a terrifying force of nature, in the form of a small creature that immediately planted itself on top of Setsuna's head, and introduced itself as Blazer. He told Setsuna not to forget the name. Setsuna looked at this tiny, cheerful thing that had nearly reduced him to ash and said nothing for a long moment. Blazer jumped to the window and marveled at how large everything looked, explaining that he had taken this smaller form to avoid draining Setsuna's mana too quickly. The days that followed were quieter, full of meals, training, and the kind of peace that Setsuna recognized as temporary. Blazer turned out to be territorial, enthusiastic about food, and extremely opinionated. Hila immediately won him over by bringing fruit. Carol took him on walks with Hila. Drago's egg soup became his favorite meal. Setsuna watched his friends and thought about how different this felt from his previous life, when he had chased strength alone and kept everyone at a distance. He also received a letter from the headmaster while recovering, written from somewhere on the road, following a lead about the apostles. It said that because of the spirit magic in Setsuna's hand, a specialized teacher had been arranged, introduced through Hila. That teacher turned out to be a 300-year-old elf named Morgana, who used an alchemical doll as her public face and hid her true form in the forest. Training with Morgana was brutal, illuminating, and ultimately life-changing. Setsuna reached his first milestone in elemental magic, sensing the presence of spirits in just 2 weeks. And then he entered the spirit world to face Blazer directly, to earn genuine recognition, rather than a forced contract. Zagan and Leo arrived at Morgana's hideout during the spirit world trial, attacking Lionel and Morgana's servants. Setsuna released Morgana from the barrier she had created to protect him, told her to handle the real world, and faced Blazer alone. He showed Blazer the landscape of his own mind, the collapsed world, the lost comrades, the regret that had sent him back. Blazer was silent for a long time. Then he said that facing despair without fear was madness, and Setsuna was certainly an interesting one. He declared a real trial a clash of wills, and Setsuna fought him as an equal. In the real world, Setsuna returned wreathed in controlled fire, and struck Zagan with techniques that combined melee and spirit magic faster than disintegration could react. When Zagan absorbed the spirit flame, it consumed him from the inside. Leo, watching Zagan burn, chose the mission over his comrade, disintegrated the spirit magic to save Zagan's usefulness, then used the chaos to escape. Zagan was destroyed. Morgana, struck by Leo's disintegration magic, appeared to be dying, but the old woman who seemed to die in Setsuna's arms was an alchemical doll. The real Morgana stepped forward, young, sharp-eared, and 300 years old. She had never been in danger. Setsuna, who had been seconds away from grief, stared at her in complete silence. She told him not to look so stricken, that crying in a place like this brought bad luck. He told her he had not cried. Before parting ways, Morgana gave Setsuna a necklace, a way to contact a water spirit for his next contract, and told him that when the time came, he should just ask the headmaster. She occasionally exchanged letters with him. Blazer told her he would burn her to ashes next time. She produced a wave of water. He looked away. They parted, moving in different directions, and Setsuna returned to the academy with Lionel, knowing what was coming. Winter arrived. The world tree's mana was running low from their training, and Setsuna told Blazer quietly, packing his things, that a major battle was approaching. In his previous life, humanity had fallen because of 4 catastrophic events. The first of them was 7 days away. A grave robbery in his hometown, where the bodies of legendary heroes would be stolen and turned into the death god's most powerful undead soldiers. Setsuna was going to stop it. He had come back 10 years in the past with nothing but a single regret, and the memory of a punch that had landed. He had chosen the magic everyone laughed at, trained with people who had written him off, and fought enemies whose power could erase anything he threw at them. He had earned the trust of a spirit born of fire, formed bonds with people who would follow him into a dungeon's lowest level, and convinced a 300-year-old elf to believe in him. He still hadn't mastered elemental magic. He still hadn't uncovered all 12 apostles. He still hadn't stopped the death god. But he had time, and he had something he hadn't possessed in his previous life: comrades. Drago training at the limits of his family's secret techniques. Isla learning that resolve made people infinitely stronger. Carol preparing for whatever came next. Lionel standing between his students and apostles without flinching. The headmaster chasing leads through the world, trusting Setsuna to hold things together. And Blazer, small and opinionated, and sitting on his head, who had looked into the worst moments of Setsuna's life and called them beautiful. Setsuna mounted his lizard and pointed it toward the road ahead. He had chosen melee magic because of a single punch that had landed on a death god. Now he was going to make sure it wasn't the last one.